the candidate was Craig Greenberg, a Democrat running for mayor in Louisville. And the shooter was 21-year-old Quintez Brown. Okay, so he was arrested on Monday, charged with attempted murder, several charges of wanton endangerment. And then 2 days later on Wednesday, Black Lives Matter posted his bond, let him out.
Yeah.
He got out 2 days.
Paid his bail. $100,000 paid his bail.
Does that seem low to you? I don't know that much
Well,
about
yeah,
bail.
so the arraignment, it was set at $75,000. Then the judge raised it to $100,000.
Yeah. That's fairly high for a 21-year-old kid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, that would have been, the judge clearly is like, okay, yes, this is doable if someone really wants to get him out, but not... It's not excessive, but it's also like, he's 21, he's probably not going to get it. But then, lo and behold, community funds, Black Lives Matter Louisville.
Yeah.
Pays.
And, as we were all getting into this story, so it seems, just on its face, okay, BLM lets out another person with a bail fund.
Right.
He did something crazy, but there is so much here to unpack. There's hypocrisy. There's the whole, corrupt bail system, how that's working. And, the core of this story is sort of the radicalization of a whole generation of Americans going forward. But before we get to that, so he was charged on Monday, released on Wednesday. He wasn't just allowed to walk the streets. He is remanded to his house, and I believe he has a tracking bracelet on.
Yes, he does.
Unfortunately, most people jump bail after they've been let go to their house.
Yes.
So hopefully that doesn't happen. The DA, the head of the city council there, they seem to believe that this was a huge misjustice that he was let out. He should have been, in their opinion, remanded to custody.
Right, because he seems to be a high flight risk. So.
But we've seen so many of these stories lately where these people seem to be a threat to the community. They're charged with these, attempted murder in this case, and then these guys are just let out on bail. And back in the streets, jumping bail. It's happening quite a bit.
Right, and there's a real problem with our prosecution and our bail system. So technically, under Kentucky law, under the Constitution of Kentucky, all crimes are required. You're required to have a right to bail for all crimes unless it's a murder, something that could merit the death penalty. But other than that, bail should be posted. Now, then it's obviously up to the judge how much to make that bail.
Right.
So if you're a high flight risk, they can say $1 million bail. $10 million bail.
Well, yeah, and there's, I'm sure the three of us probably disagree at, different stages about this, but the DA was arguing in this case that, the judge, if he deems this guy to be a risk to the community, a threat to the community, he should be able to just make the decision, if the judge feels like the DA made the case, to just remand this kid to custody. There's no bail. You don't get out until your trial. A lot of kind of conservatives have been calling for that sort of change to a lot of justice systems. What do you guys think about that?
Well, Louisville and Kentucky in general already has, more of a pro-conservative type of bail system than, say, New York. In New York, you can't even you're not even allowed to post bail for certain crimes. You have to let them out. So at least they're requiring bail.
Yeah.
I personally would be totally fine if we said, certain crimes, attempted murder, if somebody's a threat, then there's no bail. They just have to stay. Or, like Abby said, you just make it $10 million. It's basically the same thing. He's not going to get out. So you could just make it really high. I guess you could have the same effect.
I certainly understand the argument that I don't want the state to have the ability of this person that's accused and not convicted of just throwing him away and until his trial. But
I think it's a sticky issue because you don't want the judge to just have and the state to have kind of complete control over that. On the reverse side, a lot of people on the left, say that bail is such a bad idea because essentially you're just criminalizing the poor,
poverty,
because they can't pay their bail. Which is, not entirely wrong. The problem is who is committing crimes? What kind of people are they? And sadly, if you look statistically at the demographics, the people who are on the poor end who couldn't make their bail are often going to be flight risks.
Yes. Yeah, that's the
and
consideration.
they're not going to show up at their trial, and that's a problem.
Yeah, that's the thing that they don't. When everyone's talking about, well, they're the ones least able to pay for their bail. It's also they're the ones that are least likely to be a flight, or the most likely to be a flight risk.
Most likely to be a flight risk, and you're just like, well,
yeah.
And also, if you can't afford a bail because it's so high, it's probably because you did something like pretty bad that you should like be in jail. Like if it's a minor crime, it's not going to be an outrageous bail that you have to post most likely.
And in almost all these cases, and in the systems, the justice systems in the states that do it best, the judge is given the most leeway to decide. He's given all of the information. He's like, okay, knowing, what this guy's income is, knowing what crime he's accused of, this is what I'm going to set the bail at.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And judges will even take into consideration what the family is. Is there going to be anybody who can support his bail? So it's not an unfair system.
Right.
It's pretty much up to the discretion of judges.
What complicated this one for me, though, is, okay, so this guy, attempted murder, this 21-year-old kid, bail set at $100,000, which presumably most kids and families in that area would not be able to afford.
That's a lot.
Then BLM, the Louisville kind of arm of BLM, it's not necessarily associated with the national BLM. Actually, I'm not sure. They do have some local organizations associated with them. It's not national BLM. BLM Louisville. They have this Louisville Community Bail Fund.
Yeah.
Kind of like if you remember those funds that like Kamala Harris was pushing to let Minneapolis rioters out in 2020.
Yeah.
So they use that, BLM Louisville used that fund to post the $100,000 bail. And, people in Kentucky are talking now, maybe we should ban, community funds like this for being used to pay bails.
Right. So, that's definitely a consideration.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is necessarily a bad one.
Yeah.
Because, if you're just letting anybody pay bail and, it's just, a pool that you can start, that you could get all your friends at your local pub to pay your bail then every time that you murder your girlfriend. It's a bad idea. Not to mention, this whole situation came up and BLM Louisville tweeted, they just kept, they take it further and further. Someone's saying maybe we should have bail or shouldn't have bail. And they just say, we should do away with jail altogether and fund the necessary preventative measures folks beg Louisville mayor budget every year. And so when you have that type of thinking behind your community funding for bails, you're like, that's not a great model.
No. And it's funny. They tried to, disassociate with this guy. They're like, well, he's not... whatever he's accused of doesn't represent BLM. You'd have a better argument if you didn't pay his entire bond.
Right.